What's up, Auburn? Pastor Crespo here with Pastor Dustin Hall of the Try Jesus Auburn podcast. Thank you for joining us. We're here with another Q&A episode.
We are.
How are you?
I'm good.
You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, we have questions that we've gotten from people in the community, and I want to ask you a question. This comes from a very lovely young lady. It's a name you don't hear too often, and you'll get that you'll see that when we get there. But before we get to the question, I don't want to miss the opportunity, guys. You can ask questions of Pastor Hall as well. So if you want to ask questions that we can answer on this podcast, you go to tryjesusauburn.com. Check out the website. There's a place where you can send in your questions. There's also a place if you want to get some free merchandise from us, right? T-shirts. Bibles.
Yep. If you need a Bible, we've got Bibles for you.
What else? If they ask nicely, can we get them a hat?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, if you ask nicely, we might get you a nice hat. I'll have to bring mine the next time we do the podcast. But we have all sorts of things there. And also you can go there to find out where we have our meetups, right?
Right.
And one thing that we're doing here going forward is we're going to be doing Bible studies with people that just want to get to know more about the Bible, get to know more about Jesus.
Yep, in person.
That's right. Yep. So be looking on the website for that information, and we'll look forward to seeing you face to face. And by the way, I want a shout out to all of those that came to some of the other meetups that we've had already. Really enjoyed meeting you all. There was one that I wasn't able to go to, but I know you got a chance to meet some of them.
Yeah.
And so thank you for your support. All right. Let's get down to business. All right, here's a question from a young person here. Let me find it. First of all, tell us your name.
Gwendolyn.
Gwendolyn? Well, that's a beautiful name, Gwendolyn. Did you name her Gwendolyn?
Dad did.
Dad did? Well, good choice. All right, Gwendolyn, what's your question?
Why do mosquitoes exist?
Why do mosquitoes? It's kind of like asking why do little brothers exist, but I'm going to give it to Pastor Dustin, okay? Well, I figured if she's asking why mosquitoes exist, that she might ask why little brothers exist. Because, they may be just as annoying. Or in our case, little sisters. I don't know. We'll see. I might get in trouble for that comment. All right, Gwendolyn, beautiful name, by the way. Just a really, it reminds me of King Arthur. Knights of the Round Table, medieval stuff. So very, very beautiful name.
Yeah.
Pastor Dustin, what in the world was God thinking when he made mosquitoes?
I'm not going to lie. I've asked that question numerous times myself, as you're sitting out in the summertime. And
that's right.
I used to live in Minnesota, and they say the state bird is the mosquito.
Well, I spent quite a bit of time in the Adirondacks, and that's the state bird is the black fly. And those things, they don't like anyone.
Yeah. So I've asked that question too, Lord, why mosquitoes? Why? So I think the where we should start is by looking up a verse. So Colossians chapter 1 and verse 17.
We do have that here.
There's a verse that talks about how God, well, let's just read it. Colossians 1:17, and he is before all things. So that before doesn't mean that not necessarily he just existed before all things, which is true. But before, like he's preeminent, he's above, he controls, he rules. That's what that word is referring to. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. All things hold together. So in other words, God is in control of everything that it takes in order to keep life going. Yeah. And we know that he made a perfect world.
Amen.
But before we talk about the Garden of Eden, let's just talk on real practical terms here for just a second. The mosquito, sadly, is vital to life on planet Earth.
Did you hear that, Gwendolyn?
It just is.
He needs to prove that to me. So I'm here in your place. What in the world are you talking about?
So our ecosystems actually need the mosquito in order to survive. Let me give you an example.
Yeah, please.
So we have a picture here of the rainbow guppy fish. And it's a beautiful fish. I think it's a fish that Gwendolyn will really like. And sometimes you see these in pet stores and things. They're available. You can buy these.
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay. All
right. But in the wild, their main source of food is mosquito larvae. So if there were no more mosquitoes, the rainbow guppy fish probably would not survive. They would go extinct.
Oh man.
Yeah. So they need mosquitoes in order to exist.
Is I'm wondering if that's a I wonder if that's a trade-off. So, it's funny when I've seen those fish, and of course, growing up, I've had one or two of those,
Uh-huh.
and to think that they actually exist in the wild
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
crazy.
Well,
So I didn't know that they eat mosquito larvae.
They
That's their
do.
main thing.
They do. Yep. And it may contribute to their color too. But it's not just those. There's many other fish that really eat mosquitoes and mosquito larvae as a main food source.
Uh-huh.
So we would have a serious reduction in food for a lot of animals, especially fish, if there were no mosquitoes.
Wow.
So it's really kind of an interesting thought. It's a bit of a trade-off. They suck our blood and then feed the fish, and then we eat the fish,
I hear the circle of life theme in my head now.
So what are we eating when we eat the fish that eat the mosquitoes? That's
see,
gross. We won't think about that.
Oh,
very
no
long.
more fillet of fish,
No,
man. That's not happening.
So, but there's a lot of other animals as well that rely on the mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Bats and lots of other. And if there were no bats, we'd have a lot of other problems.
Right.
So our entire world essentially is all interwoven and interlocked. And that goes back to that verse in Colossians chapter 1 that talks about how God holds all things together. See, he knows exactly what our planet needs in order to thrive and survive, and what each type of animal needs in order to exist.
Yeah.
And so these animals, or these seemingly insignificant insects and things like that, are vital to our existence.
Yeah.
Sadly, I hate to admit that.
I've heard them say this about the bee.
Mm-hmm.
If we didn't have bees, we would be in so much trouble, and they're worried about them going, their numbers dwindling because of the mites. I forget what they're called, but these little tiny mites that
A parasite.
they get on their body and kill them.
Mm-hmm.
But you are the first person, pastor, layperson. You're the first person that I've ever heard defend the mosquito and its existence.
I'm not defending it. I'm just telling you the reality.
TryJesusAuburn.com. All hate mail needs to be directed towards Pastor Hall. Would I trade the guppy for no mosquitoes? I might.
But if you take out the guppy, then you affect other fish, which affects other fish. That's the
true.
point, is everything is so dependent on everything else in our world.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about our environment and how we as stewards of the earth, God made creation the way that he did in order for it to exist and live forever. So, it's a sad thing to have to say, but we really kind of need the mosquito.
You're saying that, and the thought that just jumps to my mind is the things that are created, the things that are here are not by accident or by chance. It is even. I don't like mosquitoes, right? No one does. But the way that all of these systems depend on each other, it's another argument against this notion that we evolved. Yeah. That all this happened by chance. That one thing is dependent on another. And so, I guess. Yeah. So, question for you. Mosquitoes, they bite, they suck. Did they do that before sin entered? So when God made the Garden of Eden, so I'm asking you, this is you're on the line here. Your degree and your education has brought you to this moment.
I have to say, I don't know exactly. I wasn't there, and the Bible doesn't really hint at it. But there are actually, I shouldn't say that. There are some things that maybe we can pull out of it a little bit. So in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 14, it talks about how God actually created the seasons as well. Yeah. So a lot of times we think of autumn as death, fall as death, but the Bible says God created seasons. Yeah. And so maybe fall isn't death. It's just part of the natural life cycle.
Life cycle of the trees.
Now
it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It is. And I heard a comedian once talk about how, it's we all love the fall. We love the leaves changing color, but it's really them screaming out for chlorophyll. Chlorophyll! They're on their last legs. And, well, isn't it beautiful how the leaves die? But the trees aren't dying. The trees aren't dying. They drop their leaves, and it's part of the yearly cycle.
Right.
And so, something happened after sin entered the world.
Right.
We know we've talked about this in earlier episodes where, the world and life itself had sort of an expiration date once sin entered, because it threw a monkey wrench into God's perfect creation. But God took what was there, and he, just like he does, every time the devil throws a curveball at us, every time we make bad decisions, God promises to put it all back together.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't take as a direct route as it could have to where God's taking us. I once heard a proverb that says, God writes straight in crooked lines.
That's deep.
Yeah,
that's
it's deep. But it's true, because sin and pain and all this mess that we have in our world sort of place obstacles in God's way.
Right.
But God continues to write the story, and he goes around these things that we put in our lives, that other people put in our lives, that hardship and pain put in our lives. That's, I think, what God did with creation as well. Yeah. And so we don't know exactly what the Garden of Eden was like when it comes to insects and things. We do know there was no death.
Mm-hmm.
And, Adam and Eve were eating fruits and nuts and things like that. They weren't eating animals. And so we assume that animals weren't eating animals either.
Right.
And Genesis chapter 3, 17 through 19, people can look this up on their own, talks about how nature changed and how the ground now would be harder to bring life out of, and just things changed. But as Colossians 1:17 says, God holds all things together.
Yeah.
So like we were saying, God writes straight but in crooked lines. God took the mess that humanity made by surrendering the world to sin.
Right.
And God put back together a perfect creation so that life could, not a perfect creation, but a creation so life could exist and keep going despite sin now being in the picture.
Right. Right.
So he didn't just say, okay, you had a perfect world, you blew it, it's all going to fall apart and everything's going to die now. He put it back together in a way that would sustain life until it needs to not sustain life anymore, because Jesus is going to come and we're all going to go to heaven. So we see the animals in their role and how they eat and how our ecosystems changed as a result of sin entering the world. So I think the role of insects probably changed then too.
Yeah.
And were the insects they had then the same as the ones we had now? Probably not. We talked about that in another episode too. The one about unicorns. So
go back and look for that one.
Yeah. So God somehow put creation back together in a way that it could exist now, because life was dependent on it. Became survival of the fittest. It became sometimes the strong survive off from the weak. That's just the way our world works. But yet the ecosystems were sustainable enough to sustain life. So God did a miracle despite the problem that humanity had caused.
I think, getting deeper, the idea that God did an amazing thing at creation, right? But once sin entered, and then when the flood happened as well, God had to make some corrections so things can still function, even though it wasn't like it was in the beginning.
Yeah.
So mosquitoes are important.
Yeah.
I kind of thought you were going in a different direction with, for example, the similar question: why do roses have thorns? And so I thought you were going in that direction. That mosquitoes are a result of sin, but that's not true. You're I don't want to give the wrong answer here. That it is a result. God made a perfect creation.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So Gwendolyn, I hope that you've gotten an answer here that Pastor Dustin is telling you, that don't look at the mosquito in a negative way. God created the mosquito. It has its purpose, even if we don't like them very much.
Yeah.
Now, Gwendolyn, on the next episode, I'm not going to do this to Pastor Dustin right now, but on the next episode, Pastor Dustin is going to answer this question: will mosquitoes be in heaven. I'm not going to do that to you right now.
God's the judge, not me. I can't. I don't know if I can.
No,
answer
you're not going to get off that easy. No, Gwendolyn deserves a better answer than that.
that.
Until then, we'll see you next time.